Have you ever stopped to look beyond the swinging doors of the Hollywood saloon, past the romanticized piano players and the sanitized, cheerful dancing girls? What was the true life of the women who ran the most notorious establishments on the American frontier? We are not talking about the glitz of the movies, but the raw, gritty, and often brutal reality of a madame in the Old West. Imagine for a moment a woman standing on a balcony overlooking a street of mud and manure, the air thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, coal smoke, and desperation. This is a question we rarely ask with serious intent, yet it holds a profound truth about the survival and economics of the 19th century frontier. Today we embark on a journey of discovery, not through moral judgment or Western mythology, but from a purely historical and human perspective. We want to unravel the daily life of the madam, seeing her not as a villain or a victim, but as a ruthless businesswoman and a complex human being subject to the harsh laws of a lawless land. We seek to understand how she faced the logistical challenges of running a house of ill repute in a world built for men, run by men, and often violent toward women. The madam was, above all, a survivor. Her footsteps didn't echo on the trails, but on the floorboards of parlors that became the epicenters of social life in mining camps and cattle towns. The Old West was a land of staggering contrasts. The landscape varied from the brutal, sun-baked deserts of Arizona to the freezing, snow-packed passes of the Colorado Rockies. It was a region of rustic, terrifying beauty, dotted with boom towns that sprang up overnight, places where life unfolded at the rhythm of the gold strike and the cattle drive. In these towns, the Madame's house was often the most substantial building, a fortress of civilization amidst the chaos of tents and shacks. Taking a town like Deadwood or Dodge City as our backdrop, imagine the madam waking up. Her day did not begin with the sunrise. The morning sun was the enemy of the night trade. Her world came alive when the shadows lengthened. While the rest of the town, the miners, the cowboys, the shopkeepers, were sweating in the midday sun, the madam was often just stirring, rising from a bed that was likely one of the few transformative luxuries in 1,000 miles. But how did she survive the psychological weight of her station? In a world without social safety nets, where a woman alone was viewed with suspicion or predation, the madam carved out a unique space of power. The fundamental question that guides us is exactly this. How could a woman who often came from nothing, perhaps a former kaleidoscope of tragedy herself, command the respect of outlaws, the protection of corrupt sheriffs, and the loyalty of the soiled doves under her roof? Her life was a constant adaptation to circumstances, a lesson in female resilience in an environment that offered neither pity nor comfort. The Victorian era, with its rigid morality on the East Coast, felt like a different planet. Here, the rules were rewritten by gold dust and lead. The madam's house was a business, and she was the CEO. Before the first drink was poured or the piano keys struck, she was engaged in the arduous logistics of survival. Think of the supplies. In a town where water could be more expensive than whiskey, maintaining a semblance of hygiene, the hallmark of a high-class parlor, was a logistical nightmare. She had to source clean linens, fine soaps, and fresh water in places where the streets were open sewers. She was negotiating with teamsters for shipments of silk, velvet, and good liquor, often paying exorbitant rates to ensure her house stood out from the squalid cribs down the street. The cribs were the bottom of the barrel, tiny one-room shacks where independent women worked in dangerous, horrific conditions. The madame's goal was to elevate her girls and herself out of that mud. The physical toll was invisible, but heavy. Unlike the traveler walking miles, the madam's exhaustion came from a state of hypervigilance. She was the bouncer, the accountant, the mother, and the doctor. Violence was a constant humming background noise. Every time the heavy wooden doors swung open, potential danger walked in. It could be a lonely miner looking for conversation, or a drunk cowboy looking for a fight. She had to read the room instantly. A good madame knew how to de-escalate a situation with a sharp word or a free drink, but she also kept a Derringer pistol hidden in the folds of her skirt or a sawed-off shotgun beneath the bar. She wasn't just selling companionship. She was selling an illusion of safety and domesticity in a wild place. Let's look at her diet and health, the raw biological reality. In the boomtowns, fresh vegetables were rare, and scurvy wasn't reserved for sailors. The madame, despite her money, often ate the same tinned beans, salted pork, and biscuits as the miners. But she had to maintain an image of opulence. Dinner in the parlor was a performance. She sat at the head of the table, her boarders, the girls around her. This was the family unit of the frontier brothel. These meals were crucial. It was here she assessed the physical and mental state of her employees. Who was coughing blood? Who was hiding a bruise? Who was too high on laudanum to work? The specter of disease was the grim reaper of the profession. Syphilis and gonorrhea were rampant, with no antibiotics to treat them. A madam had to be a crude physician, inspecting her girls, enforcing washing with mercury solutions that were often just as toxic as the disease itself. The fear of an outbreak was not just a health scare, it was a business-ending catastrophe. If a house got a reputation for being unclean, it was finished. The darkness of the night brought the reality of the trade. As the sun set, the saloon lamps were lit, casting a golden, smoky glow. The noise began to swell, the clinking of glasses, the raucous laughter, the off-key piano. The madam moved through this space like a general on a battlefield. She was selling a fantasy. For the men, dusty and lonely, the parlor was a sanctuary. But for the madam, it was a high-wire act of emotional labor. She had to be charming to men she might despise, laughing at jokes she had heard 1,000 times, all while calculating the tab in her head. She was the keeper of secrets. Politicians, judges, and lawmen frequented her establishment. She knew who was taking bribes, who was cheating on their wife back east, and who was broke. This information was currency, as valuable as the gold coins weighed on her scales. It was her insurance policy against raids and moral crusades. And where did she find rest in this relentless cycle? Her private quarters were her sanctuary, often the only place she could drop the mask. Imagine her retreating there in the gray hours of the early morning, when the last patron had stumbled out and the girls had collapsed into sleep. The silence of the house then was heavy. This was when the loneliness struck. A madam was surrounded by people constantly, yet she was profoundly isolated. She could not be friends with the respectable women of the town who crossed the street to avoid her shadow. She could not truly be friends with her employees, as she had to remain the authority figure. She was an island. Many madams turned to morphine or opium to dull the sharp edges of this existence. Addiction was an occupational hazard, a way to numb the memories of how they arrived at this life. Perhaps a widow left destitute, a woman abandoned by a husband, or a survivor of abuse seeking financial independence. The relationship with the town was a complex dance of hypocrisy and necessity. The madam paid taxes, often under the table in the form of fines to the city marshal. These fines effectively funded the local police force and schools. She was a pillar of the local economy, buying furniture, food, and clothing in bulk. Yet, she was a pariah. She could donate to the building of the church, but she could never step inside it. This duality defined her life. Essential, yet invisible. Wealthy, yet socially bankrupt. Let's descend deeper into the darker realities. The women who worked for her were not always the happy, willing participants of fiction. Some were desperate, fleeing starvation. The madame had to manage this despair. She was a landlord, charging the girls for room and board, often at inflated prices, creating a cycle of debt bondage that was hard to escape. Was she a villain for this? Or was she simply playing by the ruthless rules of capitalism in a merciless environment? Historical records show madams who were cruel exploiters, but also those who were fierce protectors, paying for funerals when a girl died, which was often young, and chasing down abusive customers with a vengeance. The line between exploiter and protector was often blurred by the necessity of survival. Consider the physical environment of the saloon itself. It wasn't the polished set of a movie, it smelled. The mix of stale beer, sawdust, chewing tobacco spit, sweat, and cheap perfume created a miasma that clung to everything. The floors were often sticky. The walls, covered in velvet or wallpaper, absorbed the smoke of 1,000 cigars. In the winter, the heat from the pot-belly stove made the air stifling. In the summer, the heat was oppressive, bringing flies and mosquitoes in swarms. The madam had to maintain the allure of glamour in these conditions. She wore heavy makeup to hide the scars of smallpox or the lines of worry. She wore corsets that restricted her breathing for hours on end, a physical cage to match her social one. Her wardrobe was her armor. The rustle of expensive silk announced her presence before she even spoke. It was a signal of status that demanded respect in a room full of armed men. The dangers of the trade were not just physical, but legal and political. As towns became more civilized, the tolerance for the red light district waned. The good citizens committees would form, demanding the removal of the blight. The madame had to be a diplomat. She had to know when to bribe, when to fight, and when to move on. This transience mirrored the life of the traveling preacher or the cowboy. Many madams moved from camp to camp, following the gold rushes from California to Nevada to the Dakotas and Alaska. Each move was a logistical upheaval, packing up the mirrors, the piano, the girls, and traversing dangerous territories where bandits saw a wagon full of women and furniture as an easy target. The journey between towns was fraught with peril. A breakdown on the prairie could mean death by exposure or attack. Here, the madam's ability to wield a Winchester rifle was just as important as her ability to balance a ledger. The emotional landscape of the madam was a terrain of hardened scar tissue. Romance, in the traditional sense, was a liability. Many madams had fancy men or pimps, but these relationships were often volatile and abusive. To fall in love was a risk. To marry a client was the dream of the girls, but rarely the reality for the madam. She had seen too much of the dark side of male desire to harbor illusions. Her love was often directed toward her business, or occasionally, a child she might have boarded at a distant school, kept secret to protect them from the stain of her profession. The suppression of maternal instinct, or the channeling of it into her employees, was a tragedy of her daily life. Let's not forget the inevitable end. The retirement plan for a madame was precarious. A few, like the famous Mattie Silks or Pearl de Vere, amassed fortunes, but many died penniless. The life aged them prematurely. The late nights, the alcohol, the stress, and the diseases took a toll. A madam of 35 could look 50. When her beauty faded and her ability to command the room waned, she was often discarded by the very society she had served. The suicide rates were tragically high. A vial of laudanum was a common exit strategy when the money ran out and the looks were gone. There were no nursing homes for old madames. The lucky ones bought a small ranch or a boarding house and tried to fade into anonymity, burying their past deep beneath the sod. However, historical archaeology gives us a glimpse into their resilience. Excavations of brothel sites have revealed fine china, expensive French champagne bottles, and high-quality cuts of meat. These women lived better than most wives in the West, at least materially. They created pockets of culture, hosting musicians, reading the latest literature from the East, and debating politics in their parlors. In a stark, illiterate world, the madam was often one of the few women who could read, write, and do complex mathematics. She was a bank for the unbanked, holding gold dust for miners who didn't trust the institutions. She was a confidant and a therapist long before the terms existed. The reality of the daily grind also involved the mundane. Doing laundry for a whole house of working women was a massive task. Scrubbing blood, wine, and mud from delicate fabrics by hand. Emptying chamber pots in the morning, a task that stripped away any pretense of glamour. Dealing with unwanted pregnancies, the whispered remedies, the dangerous herbal concoctions, the emotional fallout of a miscarriage in a back room while the piano played on downstairs. This was the visceral, bloody reality hidden behind the velvet curtains. In the end, looking at the madam through this historical lens, we see a figure of immense complexity. She was a pioneer in the truest sense, pushing the boundaries of what a woman could be and do in the 19th century. She operated in the gray zones of morality and law, navigating a world that wanted her services but despised her existence. Her life was a testament to the sheer will to survive. She traded her body, her reputation, and often her soul for a slice of autonomy in a world that denied it to her sex. When we strip away the Hollywood makeup, we don't find a villain. We find a laborer. We find a woman standing in the center of a chaotic, violent, and dirty room, holding it all together with sheer force of personality. We find a human being who, like the traveler on the dusty roads of Galilee, was subject to the physical demands of hunger, fatigue, and the need for shelter. But her wilderness was the human heart and the dark desires of society. Her cross was the stigma she bore, and her redemption was the financial independence she clawed from the mud of the frontier. The legacy of the Madam is stamped into the foundations of the West, the bricks of the opera houses, the paved streets, the very survival of some towns during the lean years owed much to the taxes levied on her trade. She was the shadow architect of the frontier. So the next time you see the caricature of the saloon girl, remember the reality. Remember the smell of the coal smoke, the weight of the hidden pistol, the scratch of the ledger pen, and the silence of the early morning when the mask finally came off. That was her true life, a life of profound solitude, ruthless pragmatism, and an endurance that rivals any cowboy or lawman in the history books. It is a story of the American West, written not in ink, but in resilience and survival against all odds.